this guy. As you know, he stood up at the Reform conference and told everybody that the King and the Princess of Wales got cancer because they had the COVID vaccine. This is the kind of information age that we live in at this point in time. I wanted to just share one slide of facts, which is actually a similar slide we showed last year, which is that actually, you know, we all know already that people are just glued to social media. That is where the action is at. 40% of 16 to 34-year-olds say they learn about their health, eating and wellness not at school, not from their doctors, not from their friends. They learn it from the people they find on TikTok. 40%. It's just an absolute chilling thought. And you might remember that last year, Glynis, who always says something when you remember, she said to us last year that her research showed that only 2% of the information about nutrition that was available on TikTok, I think it was factually accurate. So we are living in a world of deep misinformation. And so we're asking the question today, which is, no, that's the question we're asking later. This is the question we're asking now, which is, we know it's studied with misinformation. How can we fight back? How can we cut through in this social media age? Thankfully, I'm joined by 3 people who know what they're talking about, which is great because I've only recently discovered that I'm actually chairing this session, so I have no idea what I'm talking about. So guys, can I give you some microphones and then can I just go put my feet up? Maybe you could just introduce yourselves and tell everybody about how magnificent you are on social media. Should we go together line that way?
So I'm Emma Buckingham and I am the Managing Director of Sorted Food. We started out 15 years ago as a YouTube brand, starting a conversation around cooking and eating at home, and we've evolved into a sort of large-scale media and publishing business. So yeah, that's me.
Cool.
I am Charlotte Sterling-Reid, and the baby and child nutritionist, and I basically spend my time online giving parents advice on feeding babies, toddler and their whole family. I've also written books on the topic. I genuinely love talking about it, and I feel like improving the diet of young children and children in the early years can have such a knock-on effect to their now but also to their future health. It's an absolute no-brainer, and I don't really know why we as a nation aren't doing more, although I've seen some really positive changes recently, so fingers crossed for more.
Hello, I'm Louise Burke and I'm the Editorial Director at Net Mums. We are a 25-year-old parenting platform. We most recently launched a Family Food by Net Mums platform, showcasing not just recipes, because as we'll talk about in a bit, is this working?
I know it's working.
Is it working?
Right, okay. Mike, we're not doing well with mics today.
As we will talk about in a second, it's not actually recipes that parents or families are short of. There's an overwhelm of recipes, but it's actually how they manage those recipes and dinners for their family, both by time and money and access to food. But yeah, we're very, last year I came here, was completely inspired and blown away by all the work that everyone does here, especially Dan with VegPower. So it's delighted to come back today and be on the panel.
Cool. Okay, so Louise, I'm going to start with you. You are talking to millions of mums and some dads.
Yeah,
dads and mums through Net Mums, and I think this is an important question. Is what are they looking for when it comes to food and drink? Food and drink, food and diet, drink as well maybe, but food and diet. Yeah. What is it they're looking for?
Yeah, so like I just said, recipes, we're not in short supply of recipes. And as we know, on social media, we're served up cook-alongs and recipe videos the whole time. In fact, when was the last time you cooked a meal from a cooking show off the TV?
You know you're in Jamie Oliver's place this very moment in time, just in terms of making yourself welcome. I mean, Hugh's gone, but Jamie's everywhere, right?
But he also does the cook-alongs on his social media. So everyone's far more likely to have cooked a cook-along off social media than a TV show nowadays, pretty much. They're not in short supply of recipes, but they are in short supply of advice and support, and not just any advice and support, like we've said. It's not always credible, and there's a lot of information out there, to the point that actually parents feel the overwhelm because they don't know what advice they should trust. There's a lot of it. They don't know what they should be trusting, and also what they should be repeating in their home setup with their family and family meals. So we try and lead by example with the content that we create. We try and make sure it's all NHS aligned. It's credible advice. We work with lots of experts, such as Charlotte, Catherine, other people in the room, Fran as well from TasteEd. And we try and do a blend of expert advice with some parenting voices in the mix, make it relatable, make it accessible. We always say at Net Mums that you don't have to be perfect to be proud, because actually all these perfectly filmed cook-alongs on TikTok and Instagram are just too much and overwhelming for families. As we said before, we've highlighted many times today, families are tight for time, don't necessarily have loads of money to splurge on food, and also are dealing with cautious eaters.
So how are you going to, as food grows as an important part of the conversation you're having with your audience, you're going to get called up by everybody who's out there, right? Mm-hmm. And half the people out there are colourful. Let's go for that, shall we, in terms of their view of evidence. Let's go for that, yes. Right? Yes. But some of them are really convincing, yeah. Right? And they've got all sorts of fancy titles and names and organisations they belong to. How is you as an organisation going to filter out the Charlotte Sterling-Reeves from the Asim Malhotra?
Yeah, so we do. So, a lot of these influencers now, if they've created a huge network and following, they're often offered book deals. So we'll get tapped up by the book PR with, do you want to feature some expert advice from blah, 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 or a video? Actually, expert advice, no thank you. But if they want to create a video of them making some snacks for after school for the kids, yeah, okay, that's great, inspo. But we really try and keep, as I said, all our advice is NHS aligned and credible expert advice, and as you said, evidence-based storytelling as well.
Right. And I'm going to go for a plug here for registered nutritionists. Is Glynis in the room? Yeah. Make sure you're well surrounded by registered nutritionists. Is that the right line? Yeah. And you've got a couple of excellent ones you mentioned there. Emma, turning to you. So Sorted started as some fun-loving lads having student japes and humour over food, right? And then a terrible thing happens. They all grew up. Well, at least got older, let's go for that, and started to do things like having babies and families, and a lot of your audience has been growing up and maturing too. How's that changing you as an organisation in terms of what you're producing and what you're talking about?
Well, you're absolutely right. Sorted did start out as students talking to students, and our conversation has always been around food and eating and cooking at home. But the thing we're noticing more, it's less around how do I cook up something that's just going to impress my mates and make me look cool in front of my friends, and it's actually now evolved into people are more interested in the provenance of where their food's coming from. They want to know about sustainable, reliable kind of suppliers. They want to understand a little bit more about, I've got a little bit more disposable income now. I've grown up. The audience has grown with us. Where do I spend it? Where's the best place to spend that money? So that's what we've seen more recently. But then also it's sort of mirroring the life stages that the guys are at. They've all had children and they're in a position where, they've got sort of young families. And I think 25% of our audience are now parents. And so they're asking us the questions of, how do I get my kids to eat a meal alongside me that I'm also going to enjoy? What do I do about cautious or picky eaters? So yeah, it's definitely something that we're sort of mapping and having that open conversation with our community about. One of the things we've done recently, and it only launched last week, is we've launched the Sorted Kids channel. So it's our first exploration into kids content. So looking at how we have that conversation on YouTube directly with children, and showcasing them how they can engage with food in a different way, through play, through games, through exploration content. So yeah, it's been a really fun sort of transition over the last few years. And that's also echoed in some of the stuff we end up doing with the National Curriculum Review, and they're looking for advice, looking to give advice, to people like the Secretary of Education. So it's been a real evolution as a YouTube channel start out.
Oh. So are you going to get some new presenters, or are you just going to let your current presenters go to their natural default of behaving like an 8-year-old?
Well, we are bringing in children into the mix. So
Cool.
so the New Sorted Kids channel is fronted by children. Our team are in the background. We're asking the questions, we're posing the challenges. We're not front and centre. It's putting the kids at the forefront and hearing what they have to say about food and their experiences.
This is really exciting because I think getting kids more engaged and more involved in the food. We've talked about how you make it joyous, how you make it fun. I think getting kids more involved in food is something, a nut we've absolutely got to crack. And it's fabulous to hear that someone as influential as Sorted is having an impact on that. You've been doing quite a lot of work you just touched on, but I'd like to know more about listening to your audience and really trying to rally them as a group. Can you tell us about how you've managed to sort of mobilise that into something? Because I saw a report from you guys, it was really impressive.
Oh, thank you. So Sorted is a conversation, and we know the privilege of the platform we have. A lot of creators will use their platform as a megaphone to share other brands' messages and, sponsor deals and things like that. More often than that, we are turning that megaphone round and we are listening to our community, and we're trying to tap into their real world lived experiences, which is one, really useful for making great content that's going to be relevant and kind of accessible and genuinely useful to our end community, but also it allows us to work with our partners, which might be charities, NGOs, brands, and give them those real world insights so they can come up with new innovations, new ideas, new initiatives that can start changing behaviours properly and actually accessing the end consumer. So part of that is we've launched a sort of smaller subset of our community called the Sorted Squad, and they are our hyper engaged, really, really focused and very, very vocal kind of proportion of our community who want to get involved, who want to have a say. And I think we say quite often, as an individual, we feel quite powerless in this kind of world of health, nutrition, and what difference can I make? And we're bringing them together to have much more of a voice. So we've done some work on health and wellbeing and education for the national curriculum, and looking at what parents and young adults want from school educations. And some of the insights from that are really fascinating. People want to see more farm to fork cooking in schools, so using school kitchen gardens. People want to learn about scratch cooking in schools. We're at a point where, we're just sort of tapping into that network of very, very vocal global community that can have hopefully a massive difference on sort of end legislation and policy if we can get ourselves as Sorted into the right conversations.
Cool. Can I turn to Charlotte? So Charlotte, you're kind of, I feel like, at the sharp end of where the misinformation is, because you're talking about nutrition a lot, right? And it's nutrition where we're seeing an awful lot of really misleading information that's then guiding people towards some dodgy supplement or some terrible diet, whatever it is, right? And some of these people are really blowing up the whole protein thing. Oh my God, don't get me started on the protein thing, right? How have you managed, because you've done a really great job, right? And you're really successful. How have you managed to stand up and say, you know what, I'm actually real? How do you make sure you cut through as being scientific and credible and serious in a world where a lot of people are using far more kind of melodramatic communication techniques in order to peddle nonsense, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have to kind of explain slightly the differences between, a lot of people here may not know. On social media, for example, if you are an expert or a registered nutritionist with the Association for Nutrition, which I am, you are constrained by quite a lot of things you can and can't say. Essentially, it has to be factual, but not only that, you are bound by, I'm bound by the AFN code, I'm bound by EU regulations and laws. If you are an influencer or a celebrity, you probably have no idea about any of that. You are not constrained. You can pretty much say what you want. And that's always a real challenge, because you can have people walking into a supermarket picking up a product saying, by the way, this is toxic. And that's a message that is very clear, It's very, very simple, and you know what? It's really memorable. So people can go, that product is toxic. It's one word. It's almost so simple that will be carried on, and that is why on social media those kind of messages fly and go viral. And I have parents constantly coming to me saying, well, seed oils are toxic and soya milk should never be drunk and oat milk is really bad for you. All of these messages which are really actually detrimental, and as a parent and as someone who advises parents, it's really tough because these are the messages that they're picking up. As a healthcare professional, we might say, rather than this is toxic, we might be saying, well, actually the ingredient in that might be toxic in very specific situations, and research that was done hundreds of years ago in rats in huge doses, but actually there's a lot of controversial studies that don't agree with that, so we need more research. That's not a memorable message. Nobody's sharing that. And I think this is the trouble. We are quite literally fighting against these people who can say whatever, who have freedom of speech, who have these very clever one-liners that get shared and shared and shared. So the way I try and work in my work, and believe me, I'm not saying I've got it all completely right at all, but is by trying to take the evidence, take what we are allowed to say, and make it snappy and make it memorable, and have charts or graphs or one-liners or hooks, whatever you can do, exactly like you have been doing for VegPower, to be perfectly honest with you, taking these one-liners like eat them to defeat them and making a story out of it where there is evidence and background, and people can go for further information if they want. But as healthcare professionals, that's, I think, what we have to do now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But I'm wondering whether we should question, so poor Rebecca there. Hi, Rebecca. She tries to keep me on the straight and narrow. Yeah. It's not an easy job. I say I want to say things like, I don't know my nutrition at all, but, broccoli will give you arms of steel or whatever it is. And she's like, oh, I don't know about that, Daniel. Carrots are really good for your eyes. Well, they're really good for your eyes if you blah, 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 right? And I'm like, okay, well, should we just go out and shoot ourselves in the feet? Because the people who are peddling crap food don't care about any of that, right? Yeah. And so we're actually making it overly difficult to make good food sound great because we want to make sure that we're absolutely meticulous in the presentation of evidence. Are we being idiots? Are we shooting ourselves in the foot, Charlotte?
I think it's a good question, but if we really drill down to it, what the public need, what parents need, is honesty. And what a lot of these people are giving isn't honesty. It's opinion, which is actually based on almost nothing. So I totally agree with you, but I think there's got to be clever ways that we can do that without shooting ourselves in the foot. We can take that evidence. We just had a whole panel about beans. How can we make these things exciting and engaging and attractive in the same way that these people do, but by also still having a moral backbone, and still by being honest and transparent and believing in what we're saying? Because I think that we've slightly lost that in the world of social media. And I mean, we've seen some of the TV shows that have come out which have been uncovering some of the social media influencers who's lied about different things. Like, who wants to be that? Who wants that to be their life? So I think sometimes, Paul Glennis, whose ear I chew off constantly about health claims, as a professional, I can't work with a brand and make a health claim, but someone who is not a professional can say whatever they want about a brand. So I think there are some things that need to change, but I don't think we can do that, and I think we just have to stay on the straight and narrow, stay evidence-based, stay true to our word, but use clever people like you to help us market.
Everybody like Matt, wherever he's gone, he's probably thrown out the window, I think. Okay, so I want to ask you over the kind of, it's kind of like the half-second rule of media these days, isn't it? Is that, back in the good old days when I used to do things like newspapers, you would think about, how good was your headline and how good was your photo? But I mean, you're literally, the speed of triage of content on TikTok is just insane. It's like split-second decision-making in terms of triaging content. And then if you're really great in your first split second, you might get 3 seconds, right? So I'm going to go, this is a good question, I think, for all of you, but I'm going to start with Louise. How do you, I'm sure you get loads of stats come through for your website where you know that people only read that far down the page and all that kind of stuff, right? That data's all there. How do you get people to stay online long enough for you to actually say something that is actually going to cut through in some way?
I don't know, should we put it out to the room?
No idea, right? I think we're going to put it out to the room at the moment.
It is, obviously, it's what we all want to know the answer to. And I think going back to what you were just saying then, opinion is noisy, right? and it's quick and easy, and you can put it out there, and anyone can put it out there. The evidence-based storytelling is harder to dress up in an engaging, snappy, authoritative way that's people are going to connect with. I think if you've got a trusted audience, a trusted following, they will stick around for longer than those 3 seconds to listen to your video. We've tried all different formats as well with this expert or evidence-based content. Sometimes it just depends who it is delivering it, but those sort of profile, shoulder, head, you're very familiar with, sometimes fly, sometimes people just fall off straight away or don't even connect with. So it's really hard to get across evidence-based or authoritative, credible advice in an engaging way. And I think involving kids, like you said, is great. I think involving hacks, like for us, our content, I've said it about 3 times already, parents are time poor and don't have loads of money in their pocket, and they're juggling work, life, home, kids, and the rest of it, grandparents, all the rest of it. And so we provide, the way we package up all our content, whether it be about food, health, or education stories, it's all shortcuts to being a better parent. So the way we would package up that expert-based content would be in more of a hack way or a shortcut, engaging kids, making it relatable, making it funny as well, making people feel seen. So when they see that video, it's not like a new thing that they've suddenly got to get their heads around and learn. Like Glenys said right at the beginning, we don't lecture to parents either. It's an absolute no-no. We would only ever guide or deliver support or advice. We would never tell them what to do.
Can I add to that as well? You mentioned the statistic at the beginning that 2% of education or health and nutrition advice on TikTok is accurate, and I think that's a really good example. I've used that in talks before. I've seen it quoted in article after article after article. It's a really good example of a snappy, memorable, shareable statistic, and it's things like that need to be utilized much more, because that 2% of health and nutrition advice on TikTok is accurate is just, it flies. Everyone loves that, everyone remembers it, everyone repeats it to their parents and their friends. It's those kind of things, exactly what you said, all that relatable information, but also snappy hooks and snappy statistics that people remember. And that's what we've got to get better at, and we can do that really easily, and it can still be factual.
Right, I don't know whether is there an evidence base behind that, because as far as I'm concerned, Glenys said it, therefore it's right.
I think it was...
Well, there is an academic study in place. For me, Glenys said so.
But it's been everywhere, Glenys.
Right.
We've been quoting you.
Yeah, me too. Right, I think this is a good opportunity to open up to the floor for questions. What is our mic situation? Do we have a mic out there that works? We do.
Is this one echoing? Yes,
Yeah, but we can manage a quick echo. If you haven't got any questions, I'd be really interested in if you're prepared to share your experiences on social media, that would be fascinating for everybody. But I can see a question right at the back there with Dana.
Hi, I'm Dana Brackley from Bremen & Co. I wanted to ask the panel, I know that we've kind of focused on this 2% of nutritional information. I wanted to share very quickly, I've already bored Charlotte with this morning, a social media ad that I saw yesterday from a well-known commercial baby food brand who had a split screen. On the left-hand side was a pouch, on the right-hand side was a mum, obviously, chopping, peeling, so they showed all of it. They showed the chopping of the veg, they showed the veg being boiled, they then showed the veg being blended, they then showed an entire washing up sink full of washing up. And the transcript, which I have if anyone wants it, included the line, "One gives you more time for cuddles." Now, we are talking about nutritional information, but how do we, panel would love to hear, deal with the more commercial influence, which is using more manipulative marketing techniques that aren't just about nutritional misinformation, that are picking on the time poor, the emotional, I feel like a really rubbish mum now because I have blended all my vegetables and I'm going to have less time for cuddles. How do we tackle that stuff and not just nutritional misinformation?
Right, so we're talking about corporate. It's not misinformation because they probably haven't told a lie. It's just not really helping the world to be a better place information, right? Who fancies a crack at that one? Oh, was this the only mic we've got up here now? Right, we're sharing. We could do like we've
giving you voice on the chat.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's really tricky, and I think that brands are always going to use really clever marketing, because they quite literally have marketing teams on there that do this, and PR teams. And I think it's really tricky. The only thing I could think is that we have to be better ourselves at marketing the other side of the story. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that it's always going to be one of the questions that was on the panel was about calling out as well, that I don't think Dan got to, but was on like, do we call out that misinformation? Do we call out those tactics? And I guess, I hate the cancel culture community thing, but I think that you have to, where there's intent and where there's misleading information, or where there's things like that are tapped into that emotional side of things, I think you have to call it out. And I think we also still have to get much cleverer at marketing the other side of the coin, making it easier for families. But that is probably not answering your question. I really don't know. It's really tough. You were going to say, Claire, what was your answer?
Just made me think of the recent research done by Carol you were involved with, that said those pouches of cooked blended vegetables, which are pure, there's nothing else in them, nutritionally there's nothing in them that's, no additives, they're not overly sweetened, but the nutritional value of them is absolutely chuff all. They've got no vitamin C left in the mango puree, was it? Yeah. So I do think we should be less afraid. We should be bolder than we currently are. We can't lie, but nor do we want to. And actually calling people out when it's a clear example like that, I think, yes, we shouldn't be afraid to talk back. And I also think the way that you can play their own game is by using humour.
Yes, yeah.
Use your own very clearly, humorous, slightly sarcastic responses to put out faux messages, which are clearly not true, but they work as a hook.
Yeah.
More questions in the room? Seriously, I thought you guys are really stringing me out here. I'm asking the right. Oh, I know.
Hello, I'm William. I wonder if you have a view on whether it matters that a lot of it's rubbish. You use the example of vaccine hesitancy. Vaccine hesitancy probably results in less than 2 to 3% in the UK not taking up vaccines, whereas poor access to vaccine has anything between an 8 and 15% on vaccine uptake. And people will go to people they trust. And I just wonder whether you think it matters that 2%. If they trust the 2% that's accurate, is that more important than the 98% that's complete nonsense?
Does it matter? Who fancies a crack at that?
I couldn't avoid to say that.
I think the question you're asking is saying, actually, if we look at vaccine hesitancy, people like him stand up and say loads of nonsense, but actually the impact on society in terms of what people are doing isn't that great. But I would kind of look towards what's happening in America at the moment and go, right? But with nutrition, you say, does it matter that 2% are inaccurate? Does it matter that 90%, 80% are inaccurate? Are you suggesting that people are more discerning?
So the reason why vaccine stuff in American vaccines is the government are doing it, and the government are trusting it. If the government says don't have vaccines, people listen. If somebody who has no validity says don't have a vaccine, there will always be people who won't, but they would always do that. And I guess my question to you as nutritionists is, do we spend too much time trying to drown out rubbish and not enough time trying to amplify trusted voices?
I agree. I think amplify the trusted, but let's think about who is on TikTok. Those are very susceptible children, individuals who don't necessarily have the background knowledge. And as we heard earlier from someone who was working in schools, the teachers in schools don't know how to cook. So maybe their families don't know how to cook. So I do think a lot of children are getting a massive proportion of their education from social media. So I think it does, but I agree with you. I think we need to amplify the correct messages and the legitimate messages, and And like you said, Dan, if everybody in this room bands together and does that collaboratively, we can have a huge voice. The trouble is that often between nutritionists and other experts, there's arguments about seed oils and other things and people muddying the waters. So it means that it's all just confusing. So the public turn to those people who go, this causes cancer, this is toxic, because that message is really, really clear. But I definitely think it's problematic for the children, maybe not for the educated people who can go, don't believe everything you read, but I don't know. Again, sorry, you have a say there.
I think definitely amplifying the right message is the way forward, right? That's like an obvious one. I think it's just hard for me. Like I was saying before, the sort of the false information is even though it's 2%, is louder. It's snappier. It's been shared more, and especially when, like you say, you're talking about TikTok as well, and there's a younger audience on TikTok who are like throwing content left, right, and like me and my MD sat next to me when we were talking about beans, and when we were talking about farts, we were saying, oh God, we should do a social series about the Great British Blast Off or something, and get kids involved, because it's funny and it's silly, and that might be shared, you know, if you did that within schools and got schools on board to do like videos with their families about the Great British Blast Off and then shared that around and had some facts behind it, then that's funny and shareable and inclusive and connecting like parents with their kids talking about beans rather than the kids just going into school being taught about beans and coming home and not talking to their parents about beans and so on. So maybe it's just our approach to that expert advice just needs to be a bit more humorous and relatable and friendly as well.
You do know that we own the IP in every good idea that happens at this panel, don't you? So that's ours, right? Okay, here's my answer to you this. There's a very interesting report from Hubbard, but I can't quite remember the numbers. I suspect Rebecca Toby probably can, but I'm going to make them up. There's a worrying thing going on with our young men. I mean, generally there's a worrying thing going on with our young men, and I've got a 15-year-old and I'm worried about all sorts of things, right? But what we're seeing is this kind of protein obsession, which is just nonsense, right? I mean, just obsessive about protein. And my son's not that bad, but some kids are mad about it, right? We're seeing meat consumption increase with our young men, when really they care about the planet, but they're eating more meat because they see it as part of a kind of a macho culture. And we look at people like Eddie Abu and the kind of nonsense that he's spreading. He was popular for a while, but he's massive on social media, right? And this is all just misinformation that's feeding this change, this thing. But the interesting thing, and this is something that's a bit off topic, but I think it's fascinating, is that people on the far right, which is not my political persuasion, are using meat and food issues as an entry-level way of getting people into macho culture bullshit stuff that suddenly becomes Andrew Tate and suddenly becomes 150,000 people out walking for Tommy Robinson. I'm getting quite political here. But the point being is that I think the misinformation that's going on around protein and meat that young men are listening to has profound consequences for the political makeup and the future of our country. That would be my view, which is probably quite a strong view at that point in time. But as a father of a 15-year-old, I am really, really worried about the nonsense my son is talking about diet. Glenys.
I'll give you a stat. On the same research that found the 2%, they actually found that the
Gen Zs who were actually getting their advice from there, and unfortunately, obviously getting 98% wrong, 70% of them were following something that they were following on social media, even though they actually genuinely probably thought it wasn't right, but they were doing it, and they were doing that on a weekly basis. So yes, I do think we do need to worry about that 98% being incorrect.
Yeah. Right. Well, we've got some other questions.
Yeah,
Katie.
we have. Okay, so I'm Katie from VegPower and Food Sense Wales, but I'm talking as a parent as well. So I have a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old, both boys, and completely hear what Dan is saying. But I get regular sharing of Instagram posts from my son. I'm in a position where I can talk those things through with him, and sometimes actually the stuff he sends me is brilliant. It's really good stuff. And other times I have to sit and have a very long conversation with him that he doesn't want to listen to. But I just wanted to put a bit of positive spin in terms of what is out there, is that there is quite a lot now of advocating going on about ultra-processed foods.
And my son now will not let anything ultra processed pass his, onto his plate. He is utterly committed to whole foods. And that actually is not really, I'm sure I've had some influence over the years, I'd like to think, but it's predominantly come from the social media content. So whatever he's following has had a big influence. So I think there are people out there, and I think one of the things that's in common with the stuff that he sends me is that everybody is really passionate about what they're saying, and they have a lot of conviction about what they're saying and exactly what you're saying. They're not talking about it in academic terms. They're talking about it in terms of, you've got to do this, guys, because it's mad that we're killing all the birds and the bees. And, they're really kind of engaged with it. And I think that's what we need to capture with young people. I think just experts is not gonna cut it.
Yeah.
And we need to work out who those young people are. And the whole peer-to-peer thing, I think, is really important as well. How do we get, it's to do with the movement, isn't it? But how do we get that domino effect going with those young people who are getting it? And how do we get them then to influence their mates?
Okay, so I'm going to put a question to you here, Emma. How much should we talking about don'ts and how much should we talking about do's? Right. I think this is a really interesting question. Does that? Go for it.
So we at Sorted we don't ever preach, much to Glynis's point earlier. We, advocate all the options, but we, tell people to buy what you can afford, lean into, the activities and, things that are within your means. And I think that's one of our sort of tactics. Equally, a lot of the things we do to try and encourage people, and it's to your point also, is leading with entertainment. And while a lot of our processes, when we think about how we're creating content, what you see on screen is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the amount of research and kind of scrutiny that our content goes under. We have this thing called the 3 Ps, which is what's the point of this piece of content? Why is it useful for someone? And what are they going to take away from it? Not what do we want them to take away from it, but what is actually going to be valuable to them? So that's leaning into that sort of community ear. Then it's what's the premise of it? So how do you make that thing really entertaining and engaging? And we have a sort of series of formats, whether that's discovery formats, quizzes, lift the cloche, global taste tests, that kind of thing, that grasp people and take them on a kind of, I would say, accidental education journey where they don't realise they're learning something because they're engaging with the fun side of things. And then the 3rd P that we work on is the promise. So how do we make sure that we are delivering on both our point and our premise? And usually that comes in the quality and the kind of food output, and making sure that what we're delivering to end consumers is very sort of valid, healthy and correct. So it's all about the research we're doing behind the scenes rather than saying yes or no or do and don't, I think, from our perspective.
I love that. That's a pathway to credibility, I think, right, as well as effectiveness. So I have a question that bothers me. Right? So I can remember what the stat was we had earlier, but it's something like about 10% of people look for advice on raising their child to have a healthy diet, right? And we all know in truth, and it's true, the schools we're in are the schools that want to have people like us in their schools, which is great, right? And some of them really need us, but we also want to be in the schools that don't want us to be there, and that's a lot of other schools. But I think the same is true on a much bigger level with people. And the thing I don't really understand, for anybody who's had a kid's going to be with me on this one, is you have a kid and you go I will do absolutely anything for you, right? I will go to the gates of hell for my child, right? But I won't watch a 3-minute film on how to make them a healthy dinner, right? Why is it that there's this disconnect that people show so little interest in being better informed about healthy diets? Because realistically, any of us put out a really good post and 50,000 people watch it, we're absolutely delighted. But this is a country of 50 million people. It's nothing, right? It's like having an advert on the 247th channel on your telly scroller, right? But we're delighted. Why is it that people don't care more about what could be more important than putting healthy food inside your child as they grow? What's the inertia all about? Who fancies a crack at that? You're going to have a crack at that.
First of all, very little education about nutrition and the importance from school, from early as when you have your baby. Again, someone mentioned earlier, you get advice during pregnancy, you have your baby, there is no advice. You have to seek that out around feeding your baby, toddler, family, yourself. So you have to have an interest. Second of all, as parents, life is so difficult. You are juggling everything. You're also feeling guilty about everything that you're doing constantly, not doing the right thing. You then throw in the fact that cooking a healthy dinner seems to cost a lot of money, to take a lot of time. There's a lot of convenient options out there available. And then also you've got the controversy that we've already spoken about. Well, I was giving them oats and now I've been told that oats are really bad for my child, so I thought I was doing the right thing and now I've realised I'm doing the wrong thing. So you combine all of that and then you add on working parents who are always tired and exhausted, and then you throw in fussy eating. You don't even know where to go as a parent, or allergies or complications, or them refusing the meal that you've just made. If you spend 35, 40 minutes cooking a meal for them and it gets refused, why are you going to do that again? So I think it's not one thing, two things. It is a massive combination of so many things that makes parents go, I love my child so much, I'll do absolutely everything for them, but I've tried and I've kind of given up. And I know there's other options out there, and the companies are telling me they're really good, so I'm going to choose those. That's my take.
Ditto. I think going back to the hacks, the shortcuts again. There's one thing being like a video coming up saying this is a healthy meal for your family tonight. Scroll past. This is 3 ingredients from your fridge that takes 10 minutes, and you will have clean plates at the end of it. I'll watch that. So we did, smug parent brag here, but I saw a Zoe video, and it was Tim Spector doing his kefir, frozen mango chunks, and a dash of honey in making a sorbet or an ice cream. He obviously blended some pistachios and flaked them over the top. I didn't. I just whacked the kefir, the mango chunks, the honey. Kids came home from school in the summer. They're like, oh my God, have we got ice cream? I'm like, yes, you have. And it was immediate, right? So I didn't have to freeze it overnight or anything. They are still having that. They'll have that for breakfast. They'll have it after school. And that makes me feel like a slightly smug parent because it's all very healthy and it's easy to do. And it's affordable. To me. So I think, so I wrote that as a piece. The point I'm getting at is that I wrote that as a piece, and I did the 3 ingredient ice cream for our new family food website, and it was one of the top stories in one of our launch weeks because it was successful. People saw it. I have tried it. It's 3 ingredients in the fridge, and it's immediate. Yes, please. I'll take that.
Yeah. Right, we're starting to run out of time, so just want to see if there's maybe time for one more question or one more point from the audience. I can see Sarah at the back there. We will get a microphone to you any moment now. Last question of the day. Let's make it a hard one.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of address the insidious nature of misinformation, because being a public health professional as well as the food system lead, vaccine hesitancy is a massive issue because to get herd immunity for MMR, you need 95% uptake. And after COVID, there's been less than 90% uptake. In areas of London, there's less than 75% uptake of MMR, which means that those who are most vulnerable are not being protected. But I think the issue with food sometimes is people really downplay the damage and the medical issues that can come from the misinformation. But I just wanted to raise that because there was a message of vaccine hesitancy not being a problem. And I think as professionals, sometimes we're so much an expert in our own area that we forget to be just as focused on other topics as well. So it's not so much a question, but just a word of caution that this is actually a big issue that we're facing.
Right. Commas matter, don't they? Right. I mean, I was telling somebody earlier on how in my previous darker existence, used to sit in rooms full of extremely clever people who are being paid large sums of money to try and figure out how to get an extra burger onto the side of a Big Mac, or how to get men to eat more crisps at male bonding moments, and other such profoundly important issues that I spent many years of my life working on. And if we could put half that energy, if we could get more people like Matt, if he's still here, you still here, Matt, somewhere? No? But if we get more people like Matt, who are just really great communicators, getting more on kind of our side of the food argument, that would make a big difference. But I want to end up by asking the panel, each in turn, hang on, I have to look at a piece of paper here. Right, from each of you, what's your top tip for creating compelling content that cuts through the misinformation noise? We are all pens point at this point in time. Oh, Louise, first with her first.
Tough, I've got the mic.
Everyone's saying one, yeah, exactly. I would say, going back to what I said at the beginning, evidence-backed, expert, credible, short and snappy, relatable, featuring people. There doesn't have to be a big influencer. It can just be someone that people relate to in a situation that people relate to as well.
Fine.
I would say find a hook and caveat.
And I'd lean back into those 3 P's: point, premise, and
And the other one.
promise. Point, premise, and promise.
Right, I hope somebody like that.
Oh, it's been a long day.
Right, there is only one thing now that stands between us and carrot cake. There's only one thing now that stands between me and a gin and tonic. Large one. And that is my esteemed and incredible chair. But before he steps up, could I ask you all to give a massive round of applause for our brilliant panel? Thank you very much indeed.